Bandwidth provided by Recursive Squirrel Interactive. Transcription services provided by TranscribeMe.com. Visit them on the web at transcribeme.com/BeanCast for up to 25% off. That's transcribeme.com. Episode 523, A Diverse Resume. Monday, December 3rd, 2018. It's time for this week's edition of the BeanCast, a weekly discussion about the news and issues facing marketers today. I'm your host, Bob Norp. Thanks for joining us. Holiday retail has become an increasingly fascinating spectator sport in recent years. The move to digital and the rise of mobile shopping has been completely upending the sector. So how well is retail faring this year? Tonight we'll discuss. Also, how the troubled toy market survives another year, why creatives are finally embracing data, email's GDPR boom, plus this week's Ad Fail 5. That's the lineup. Let's meet tonight's panel. Thanks for joining us for this week's BeanCast. I'm Bob Norp, and with me on the panel for this evening, we start with the head of marketing for CBD nutraceuticals business Charlotte's Web, Mr. Colin Glom. Hey, Colin.
Hey, Bob. How are you guys doing today?
Doing great. Now, next up, we have the founder and chairman of Streamlined Media and CEO of multicultural agency Bold Culture, Mr. Darren Wesley Martin Jr. Hi, Darren.
Hey, Bob. Thanks for having me back.
My pleasure. And finally, we welcome back the CEO and creative director of Allscope Media and board member of Mashburn Enterprises, Mr. Jonathan Sackett. Hi, Jonathan.
Hey, Bob. You forgot former rapper.
It's just like, I never know whether to bring that up, but I thought you were a hip-hop star. I didn't think you were a rapper.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much.
Believe it or not, check YouTube for Jonathan Sackett. You will find the video. It is quite amusing.
Hey, by the way, I am invited to play at a private party in Paisley Park this month.
Oh, no way. Yeah. Just for those of you who've never listened to this show prior to this episode, Jonathan was a Prince recording star at one point. So it should be interesting to see him there if you are in the Minneapolis area. Well, anyway, we've been charting this shift over a decade, the shift of retail from brick and mortar to e-commerce. But this year, we've reached some pretty incredible milestones, according to Adobe Analytics. And let me just pause here and say that the PR team at Adobe Analytics has been working overdrive. I can't think of a single news program talking about Black Friday and Cyber Monday that wasn't quoting Adobe Analytics statistics over this season. You know, I've been in touch with their team on a number of occasions and have been to the summit out in Las Vegas. They are a pretty great team, and they're doing an amazing job trying to dominate the season. But anyway, this is the first year that Cyber Monday sales exceeded Black Friday transactions, and mobile is driving much of this growth, with both Cyber Monday and Black Friday resulting in mobile accounting for over 50% of transactions. So, Jonathan, what's the big story for you in all of these data points? I mean, what's happening with this shift from brick and mortar to e-commerce that's making this year particularly interesting?
Yeah, I think, over the years, let's face it, we've all been watching this slowly turn, right? So, but the big surprise to me was that the amount of transactions, because typical mobile behavior historically has revolved around lurking, comparison, shopping, and interaction, but not transaction. So in other words, people would post their likes or dislikes and interact, but they wouldn't transact. And what you're seeing, and if correct me if I'm wrong, the statistics that I've seen historically has been around a 15% transactional rate through mobile. So if this has now jumped to 50, either there's been a huge cultural shift, or The statistics are just inaccurate.
It could go either way, really, when you think about it. I mean, the statistics.
That's a historical jump. That's crazy.
The statistics that Adobe is turning out there are pretty wide ranging in the sense that they cover a lot of retail operations. They don't cover all the retail operations, but they cover most of the big ones.
Right.
And that gives you some level of accuracy in trying to gauge how effective mobile is. And this is a stunning development. Darren, what's your take on this on this news? What kind of key takeaways are you taking from all this chatter going on?
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised that Cyber Monday has taken over Black Friday. It's so easy now to just order something. I live in New York. It's easy for me to just order from Amazon.
Can we just agree to not call it Cyber Monday anymore? I know that's become a meme this year, but it's so crazy that we're still calling it Cyber Monday, especially considering that over half the transactions on Black Friday were cyber transactions.
Well, yeah, I think that's the case, right? People do not want to go out anymore, stand in lines. That used to be an event. I think that people can now just order off of their phones. I can order and get something in 2 hours. We have to look at the deals that are online versus in store, right? I think it's a convenience thing. I think that people are shifting into ordering more online because of that convenience. I'm from the South and it's great when it's Black Friday. There used to be lines just around the corner just for TVs now or for anything, and it wasn't necessarily the case this Thanksgiving, and so I'm not surprised at all. I don't think that it's the analytics. I think it's just the consumer trends at this point.
One thing about this whole differentiation between Cyber Monday and Black Friday that still bothers me overall is the fact that this is not just a set moment in time anymore. It's not about one day of shopping, whether or not it's a digital day or whether or not it's a small business Saturday or whether or not it's a Black Friday. I mean, it's one continuous shopping experience from the minute Thanksgiving hits. And, I think that the statistics that we were looking at, Colin, show us that there's an entire process going on over the course of this weekend that is becoming so much bigger and so much more dynamic. What's your take on all this?
I think having looked at the data, it was indicative of a really crappy third football game on Thanksgiving. Because that's when
he may have a point here.
That was when the spike started to happen when the Falcons were getting beat down. The other thing that I do want to comment on was, which you already pointed out, Bob, was Adobe is killing it. I couldn't believe the amount of press releases that I saw that had to do with them being quoted as the source for all this data. It wasn't like Equifax or any of the big transaction companies. It was Adobe across the board. It was really interesting, and maybe consider them as part of our automated marketing platform.
Yeah, I'm in touch. Like I say, I'm in touch with a few of the PR people over at Adobe on a semi-regular basis, and I was trying to get together with one of them here in New York, and he's like, "Nope, not going to be able to do it. Not until after Cyber Monday's through, because we're going to be charting all these statistics all week long." And sure enough, I mean, everywhere I looked, there was some kind of news story that was quoting their statistics, whether it was on a podcast or out there on a blog, or whether or not it was on the national news. I mean, everybody was quoting this. Really, really great PR coup.
Yeah. In terms of the overall weekend, I think what Jonathan said earlier is probably the most accurate piece of it, or at least in my life and the things that I'm experiencing. The ability for me to use one-touch purchasing and have my credit card information and my address, shipping address, and all that stuff filled out automatically because I've been to that site before, because Google recognizes it through Chrome or whatever it might be. That barrier of having to, the annoyance of trying to enter all that data on a phone has been largely eliminated. And that, to me, is one of the biggest shifts in why people are starting to buy from a convenience standpoint mobily. Not just through digital means, but actually on the mobile phone, where you can do it wherever. You could be over at your aunt's house after dinner and start your shopping while you're just sitting there on the couch listening to somebody else drone on. So the ability for us to start that earlier in the process is obviously there. And to your point, Bob, about it just being one continuous event, we had some really stark success between Black Friday and Monday, Cyber Monday, because we used different triggers and different opportunities to message our consumers with I wouldn't say warnings, but like reminders that, okay, you only have a couple of hours left. And those triggers through email and social means were really super effective. So it becomes almost like behavioral engineering. So you can start to like understand how people are using the technology, and how we're also kind of gaming the human brain into making those purchase decisions.
That's something interesting that Colin mentions, Jonathan. I mean, this whole idea that when you have the information already in place, mobile becomes a lot more attractive to you because you're not trying to enter in all this detail on that little screen. And could it be that there's two factors in play here in the mobile universe right now? One is that screen sizes are getting bigger, so it becomes a lot less onerous to enter information in. And two, are retailers actively reaching out and trying to acquire new customers prior to the big shopping season in a much more targeted fashion, so that when the big shopping season comes along, it's less of a barrier for them to participate in the sales opportunities that are available over this week-long shopping extravaganza?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's remember, it's taking, I think what they're doing a good job at is, the wallet features and the wearable web, right? And wearable web typically meant those silly glasses and stuff. So I don't mean it that way. I mean the web that surrounds you and provides utility. I think just like, my first job was in retail, and I worked for a clothing place. I used to work at Merry-Go-Round. You guys remember Merry-Go-Round?
Yes, I remember
The
Merry-Go-Round.
IOU sweatshirts.
The winner of the most diverse resume is definitely Jonathan Sapp.
Well, so the way I'm looking at it is we had our own version of doorbusters, right? So you'd put the IOU sweatshirts out, and you'd mark them down best you could. The people would come in and buy those. Now you're trying to cross sell them or continue the sales cycle on them, right? Well, with between Black Friday and White Monday, I didn't want to call it Cyber Monday, so I thought that would be clever, but I guess
what are you talking about?
no, I thought we agreed we weren't going to call it Cyber Monday, so I'm calling
Yeah, but that's
White
a terrible name.
Anyway, what they're doing, what these companies are doing a good job at, is they're getting your attention between those days to benchmark with the right product to lead you in. I think the biggest problem that they're having, though, ironically, is the profitability. Because if you talk to a lot of these companies, they're getting their e-commerce transactions through, but they're not getting the profitability because, number one, you're either building your own e-commerce, which is not very cost effective, plus you've got security issues, or you're partnering with the Amazons of the world or other retailers, and what ends up happening is you have to pay their exorbitant tax in some cases. So you're getting the transactions up, but you're not getting your profitability up, and I think that's where the key is going to be moving forward, is how do you balance that so that you're getting your digital footprint out there, you're getting the one-touch transactions from the mobile phone or voice-activated command, and you're converting, you're continuing to speak with those customers, and you're making it profitable. That's going to be the key.
You bring up a really super interesting point, and I want to get Darren's opinion on this one. This idea that Amazon and the other big players are exerting some kind of, onerous force on the smaller players, and that profitability is the big hurdle that still needs to be overcome when it comes to e-commerce, considering the fact that you have to play with Amazon even if you have your own e-commerce store these days, and Amazon is not playing nice.
Yeah, I think that when you think of smaller businesses or smaller enterprises who are trying to get into the game, it's hard, right? E-commerce is probably one of the most difficult, for me, areas of digital marketing, of this digital game, right, or industry, and it provides type of disadvantage. When you think of larger stores, people are still trying to wrap their head around what works. I think Amazon is doing well. I read a report that in your BeanCast bites talking about Facebook's inability, right, to actually garner some type of scale, or this year being their ad product just sucking this year. Let's just put it out there like that. I've experienced that as a digital media buyer, reading the stories there just on the crap that happened from Monday to Wednesday, within, preparing for Black Friday and Cyber Monday. It's just looking at those things, Amazon is winning because I think its process is effective, and it has trustworthy software. And to your point, it has advocates out there on the ground who are showing that the platform is trustworthy, who are showing that the industry is taking on Amazon as this new analytical kind of background, and it already has proven via many of its other services before that it's reliable, right? And so I think it's taking advantage of some of the hiccups that other digital media companies are failing at, which is process.
There was another article specifically calling out Amazon, though, for using strong arm tactics when it comes to smaller, direct-to-consumer brands. They had this iPhone holder company that they were quoting, but this idea that, they are the only game in town when it comes to mass retail online. It's just like there are some competitors, but not really. Amazon dominates online. So,
it's no different than it's been that way for decades with retail.
Yeah. Well, it's absolutely been that way for decades. But what happens in offline scenarios is that you need to figure out other lines of distribution. And, a lot of companies were successful at navigating the Walmart trap and trying to maintain profitability, either by making cheaper products and putting them in the Walmart stores, or by maintaining quality and finding other avenues of retail. And it seems like that's the next big hurdle that retail needs, that most of the brands selling through online sources need to kind of figure out at this point. Do we go direct to consumer? Can we afford it? Is it going to be as profitable as going through this kind of bottleneck that is Amazon, that's just not really protecting your IP and not really giving you that exclusivity that you would hope to have on that platform?
Yeah, and I think that it goes into it's what classifies small, right? I think someone who's doing something where they're just using Amazon as a platform, and they have certain products like an iPhone case or something else where they don't have a mass amount of capital or product to go to Walmart or go direct to the consumer, but Amazon is providing them value because they can just ship what they sell, right? Or if we're talking about mid-level or larger companies who have the budget to actually go into stores and sell their product and go through that process. I think for smaller shops, they for sure are lending to all of their efforts towards things like Amazon, or going to Facebook or Google. But we have already talked about Amazon establishing that authority and also that reliability, and they are shutting them out. But I think it's the same thing with Facebook, right? The players who gain the most money for Amazon, give the most money to Amazon to help push their products, are going to be the ones Amazon caters to.
Well, yeah, you got to remember the rule of thumb. The game has changed, but has stayed the same in so many ways. Because what happens is big companies and conglomerates will play nicely only if they have to. That's the rule of thumb. So what happens with an Amazon, all they have to do, you can call it strong arm tactics, or you can say it's realistic tactics to come to you, the smaller companies, and say, look, here's the deal. If you get a security breach, you're screwed. But if Amazon gets a security breach, then it's our problem. So do you want to have the problem, or do you want to make it ours? So it's twofold. One is the outreach, right? Getting your message out there. Do you go direct to consumer, getting your presence known in search and social, and then getting the people to come to you and transact, and having that cybersecurity on your side.
I thought this one in particular was a little bit shady. They were talking about this pop, the things that sit on the back of the phone to make it like a little kickstand. And the fact that they said, all right, fine, well, we'll just sell through another third-party shipper still on Amazon's platform, and Amazon shut them down. I was like, dang, that's that is some old school mafia stuff right there.
Well, because they can, you know.
Well, where does e-commerce need to move next then? I mean, what's the we understand that profitability and distribution remain an ongoing issue that need to be solved for a lot of companies. I mean, big retail players like Amazon and to a certain extent Walmart and through Jet have solved this problem. But we know that they have an ongoing issue to solve there, but where do we still have room to grow strategically and tactically in this business? I'm going to start with you, Colin. What do you think?
I can only say that there's so much competition that they've set the bar so high, it's almost impossible for many companies to have the logistical infrastructure to react as quickly as Amazon does, right? I can buy something and I think Darren pointed out 2 hours later it's in my house. That's becoming the norm for a consumer experience, and it's almost impossible for companies to provide that level of service without somebody's infrastructure to ride upon. So I don't know what the innovation is going to be. I don't know how we can improve on that. I mean, I guess you can go to Jeff Bezos' vision for the future in which drones are hovering all over major cities and dropping off packages every couple of seconds. But outside of that, I don't really know how we can improve upon it. It's such a ruthlessly efficient machine that has tentacles into every aspect of the supply chain, from the Amazon Web Services that you're shopping on the platform of, all the way through to the delivery of these things and how they control FedEx. I don't know what you can possibly innovate. I'm not sitting inside the walls of Amazon. I'm sure they got plenty of things that are coming, but I don't know from an e-commerce standpoint how we're going to be able to beat that, no matter how much money or attention we throw at it.
And Darren, what would you say the big trend to watch for in e-commerce is over the next year, over the next couple years?
I think the big trend will be Amazon. I hate to say it like that, but it will be, unless Facebook gets into shipping and they overhaul their processes and their shopping capabilities. And I know they're going that route mostly with Instagram. They have the scale to do it, but I don't think they have the process. They don't have the focus to do it right now. Google could do the same, but I don't think that that's in their focus as well. Amazon has positioned itself very well, and I don't think from a direct-to-consumer perspective that, some companies are able to play that game. The ones that are able to possibly will go that route. But, for those who are making millions on e-commerce just from a small business side, and as we all have said, use the platform of Amazon to do so, I don't see anything necessarily changing from that.
And Jonathan, any last thoughts on all this? I mean, any last pieces of advice for retailers or any kind of thoughts on what the future looks like?
Yeah, I mean, I would buy my album if I were everybody listening. No, so here's the way I see it. I agree with everybody. Everybody's dead on. The only thing that I would add is this. I think what we're going to see, if I'm going to predict the future, first of all, I don't know the future of commerce, let alone e-commerce. I want to point that out. So is this going to turn into a Bitcoin society or something? Who knows? But I would say this. The way to refine and move forward is, I would refer to it as auto voice transactions. Okay. So instead of, hey, do you want to come here and buy this product? It's going to be sensors in the home that detect when you're out of something, and your voice system, whichever utility you're using, it will ask you confirm the transaction, and it goes through. So auto voice reminders, I think voice is going to be the frontier of e-commerce, but I also think it's going to be reminders of purchase. Let me caveat that. What you're describing, though, is the future of consumer packaged goods, not holiday shopping per se, because it's just like the whole shopping experience for gift giving and for bigger purchase items is a lot different from the consumer packaged good experience, which is basically, I'm out of toothpaste. Damn, I wish I would have thought to get that. That's very true. But I would say if a voice system, whichever one you have in your house, reminds me of the things that I purchased last year, that would be very helpful.
That's really super interesting.
I'll throw another one in there if we're just talking about the future or like trends and stuff like that. I think one of the things that I found really interesting was I was doing some ugly sweater shopping for a Christmas party that was coming up over Thanksgiving weekend. And I bought something through Instagram because that's where I would happen to find the thing I was looking for. And it was coming from a small company in China. So the idea of the globalization that we have with these large multinational corporations is now being done by the little person too, and they can do it through those social platforms, and it makes it look like it's a store that could be right around the corner from you, and it doesn't matter. The package is going to take 6 days because it's being slow boated from literally China.
That's super interesting as well.
Was the sweater 2 sizes too small?
That's my normal go-to.
No, I actually in that space work with a lot of smaller businesses who use social media specifically as their e-commerce platform. I think the problem comes into getting the shirt maybe 2 weeks too late. So they have to actually make money to build the process to then scale. But that's definitely what people are using every day, just creating different types of products, both on a high end, lower end, and just pushing it out through social, many of times using the shop feature or the link in bio feature, or different link in bio type accessories that allow you to click through on Instagram. But what the trend there or what the risk there would be is actually the process of actually distributing that out. But of course, like we talked about, that's a larger trend.
Well, I want to evolve this conversation about holiday shopping into something that's particularly troubling for the industry this year. It's not been a good year for the toy business. I mean, the closure of Toys R Us left many toy makers without a significant source of holiday revenue, as well as left a lot of toy makers holding the bag on a significant amount of inventory and payments that were not paid out. Meanwhile, the demand for toys is being outpaced by demand for screens, devices, apps, things like that. So, Darren, how does the toy industry survive this seeming disaster happening in slow motion? This is not good for the business as a whole.
Bob, when you mentioned that toys are outpacing screens, I was just so surprised, but it doesn't surprise me because children, and I'm talking through the perspective of my niece and nephew, they see a toy, they see something, they want it, they play with it for a week and they want something else, right? But on a trend basis, they're always on their phone, they're always on their iPad. My question is, how many iPads or phones can you buy? It's possibly why toys are outpacing.
Well, what it comes down to is what the kids are bugging you for. And that's always been what holiday shopping's about. And what kids are bugging you for is this app, this game, this thing that I can put on my screen. And it's almost like the toy industry has gone from being the hot item that everybody wanted, to a razor blade strategy, which is you sell the one expensive item, the handle, and then you sell a whole bunch of blades to fill the handle.
For sure. Look, Toys R Us went out of business. It's coming back, and it's interesting to see what they'll do. But I'd suggest they merge some type of digital media experiential type of platform so that they can have the children come in and experience these maybe esports. We think about esports and we know that children watch online gaming just through YouTube itself, right? So they have to merge the trends essentially. And if Toys R Us or any other toy store is going to actually win, they're going to have to bridge, bringing the child in, having the toys there, having the platform and some type of AR or VR type of experience, and then having it where they can then take out of the store and continue along with the journey so that children can stay interested. And that's going to take a reshifting, I think, of the toy industry, or it's going to show that larger players like, let's say, a Disney or any of the franchises that are out there are going to be the ones that actually do this correctly, because they can extend the story throughout generation or years. So the industry itself, as far as brick and mortar stores where people just come and pick out toys, I think that that's going to have to shift. But they have an opportunity to reinvent themselves in this new year or new decade and really turn some profit, I believe.
The thing you just described to us is identical to what Walmart is trying this year. I'm not sure if you saw that article in the clippings document, but Walmart, has really stepped into the gap when it comes to Toys R Us. and has done so in a very interesting way, giving people an opportunity to be toy testers online and actually play with virtual versions of the toys ahead of the purchase
That's pretty
experience.
cool.
Yeah, and it gives you a real job that you feel important about as a kid, quote unquote real job, and get you involved with this toy ahead of time. I think that was really innovative, and it's a super interesting way to do things. Jonathan, what's your take on all this? I mean, how does the toy industry navigate this? Is it all about AR, or is it all about trying to just not fight the uphill battle and go for the razor blade strategy of trying to develop products that are filled by content?
When you said razor blade strategy, it scared me at first because I wasn't thinking of Dollar Shave Club. I was thinking of slicing people, and I was thinking, where's he going with this? But now that I have clarification, um, I'm slow this morning, so please bear with me. So. I do think it is what you refer to as a razor blade strategy. I do think it's that way because here's the deal. If you look at if you compare retail to eating, okay, Hostess came back, okay, and I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but Hostess, most of their products aren't really good for you. So just
oh my God, you're telling me something I never thought about before. A Twinkie is actually bad for me? This is unbelievable.
But okay, Bob. The thing is that if products that are not good for you and eating habits have changed, okay, but they could still bring a product back like that and it can work. I look at the toy strategy the same way. I do think it's going to be about buying the next cartridge, buying the next game. It's going to be more of the high tech, low touch strategy, but we can't force people to do high touch, low tech if it's just not going to warrant it. The demand is not going to be there. I don't have kids. But I'll tell you something. Anytime I'm at a get together where people have their kids there and stuff, the kids are always, even the babies are chewing on their parents' iPhone, and that's more interesting to them than the crappy toys we used to have, which were metal Tonka trucks, etc. They want that technology. Kids want to play with it. They want that degree of interactivity that digital provides, and I think that you can't fight that uphill battle.
Go ahead, Colin. Then I'll jump in.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think there's one other kind of, at least for me, disturbing trend that we haven't really talked about, and I didn't know if the conversation was going to go this way, so I just want to get the thoughts of the rest of the group here. But the same thing happened about 18 months ago with the sporting goods industry, and the demise of a couple of key players in that field has really kind of signaled the death knell of but a lot of team sports. Kids are just not interested in being outside, and I don't think they're being asked to go outside and use their imaginations to play, or use their physical bodies to be active while they're doing it. So it's kind of like, at least for me, seeing the world through the eyes of my god kids. Which,
well, one second, is this something that CBD can actually benefit?
No, I don't think we can cure that.
I think they're interested in building YouTube channels right now. My niece is 8 years old, and she's asking for Premiere Pro and asking for a DSLR camera, and that's a trend across many different children, whether they're creating or they're consuming. But it's actually just a byproduct of our consumption habits and what we've been doing. Right? They grew up as digital natives. They were here. We kind of trained them to be on the phones or on an iPad. And we're going to see a lot of demise of even I went back home and talked about marching band, right? And that's not necessarily a thing anymore when you think of art from that perspective. So many active things, including sporting goods and sports, but also toys, are going to go away.
You know what? Yeah, I think I would just add to that. I think you're right. I would say define toy, right?
Right. That's going to be the shift.
Well, I'll tell you what's not going away is the cost of these American Girl dolls. This is
Oh,
insane.
yeah.
The shopping list that I got was insane.
Well, that's something
I've heard
that's
about
something
it.
to really consider. The American Girl doll is not just about a doll; it's about a content experience that wraps around the doll. We're talking
Exactly.
about the opportunity to buy books and to learn the history of these dolls and the time period they lived in, and we're talking about the movies that are created and the videos. And I think that there's some toy manufacturers who are well ahead of the game and ready for this shift. One in particular, Spin Master out of Toronto, which is like the third or fourth biggest toy company in the world now, is the maker of Bakugan, is the maker of more recently the Paw Patrol, and both of those content franchises or toy franchises are rife with content opportunities that suck the person in, suck the child into this entire world of imagination that they consume on the screen and then want to take offline. Is that going to continue to be the way into the child's heart going forward? Is content the way forward? Are we always going to have a Lego movie in order to sell Legos?
I think so. It's really, when you create an entire platform like that and it surrounds a kid or even an adult for that matter in 360 degrees worth of interactivity, that's the thing that's going to make it a success. Now, the interesting thing that I want to bring up is like you have these like I would say these almost like bubbles in some of these industries, especially in toys, where a couple of years ago everyone was talking about Pikachus and going out and finding these things, and people were walking off of cliffs with AR phones trying to find.
Oh, they still are, my friend. They still are.
But now you look at something like a Fortnite. I don't know if you guys are familiar with this.
Yeah.
My godson. It was one of the hardest things in the world to actually experience with him, because trying to buy credits for him meant that I needed to go in through his mom's phone to make the purchase, and it was just like, how are you making something that's this popular so hard to participate in from an adult kid interaction standpoint? It was just really bizarre. So you see some things that are like so popular that it almost defies logic because they're so hard to use, and they're still making waves. Or you look at the rise of those interactive games that are now out in the world in 3D, and some of them are not nearly as popular as they were when they first came out. So I don't know if it's when you try and make it ubiquitous, it kind of loses its luster a little bit. And I think there's a really fine line that you have to balance in between being ubiquitous and being kind of the cool thing.
You know what? You bring up an interesting point. If I can just add this quickly. It wasn't all that long ago that, Bob, you were talking about content play. If you guys remember the G.I. Joe show, the cartoon, if you remember He-Man.
Knowing is half the battle.
Well, the thing is that very good, Padawan. What they did that was a content play that they got sued for. Okay, it's the same thing with McDonald's, with the Grimace and Ronald and Mayor McCheese and all that stuff, marketing to children. But yet, you're able to do it nowadays without the lawsuits. I would say American Doll, by providing content, or American Girl, I'm sorry. They're doing the same thing that 20 and 30 years ago companies were sued for. That's interesting to me, because if it is a content play, then when do the lawsuits come out about unethical marketing to children and things of that nature?
That's a great point. I never thought of it that way, but you're absolutely right. It's literally an extension. It's a half-hour long commercial that you're watching for a doll.
We should all do this for a living. Nah, this is too hard.
Well, I want to move on to another interesting topic I read about this week. Young creatives are starting to embrace data resources more readily than their older counterparts. And instead of stifling creativity, as we always feared it would, it's instead inspiring better work. A lot of people are very excited about the opportunities that data presents. So, Colin, what are some of the unexpected ways that data is powering the right-brained part of this business?
I just want to thank you for giving me this one, because I was so excited to read some of these articles and get immersed in this, because it's something that I live and breathe every day. Data-driven creativity is definitely something that's not just a trend. It's going to be here for the foreseeable future. And I don't want to use a lot of kids, not like younger people, I should say, not kids, but younger people, when I talk to them, are fearful of what it's going to mean for their jobs, because they can see in certain instances the creative control is being taken away from them. And I don't really necessarily think that that's the case. I think what you're going to see is this ability to unlock larger and larger solutions that are going to be driven by the art director or the creative director or the copywriter, that artificial intelligence and or machine learning are going to take some of the grunt, the mechanical Turk work out of. So rather than sitting down and doing 6 layouts of an ad, you're going to have data that tells you where and how people are interacting with those ads online, and it's going to allow you to make the messaging hierarchy decisions even faster through that artificial intelligence. Now you're going to have those 6 pieces that you need to work with, whether it's the tagline, the image, where the logo goes, etc. That stuff will start to get kind of massaged out, and you'll start to learn exactly how it works best. But you, as a creative person, will be able to see a much larger picture as the scope of like, okay, I need to do this style of ad to make somebody aware of something. I need to then create this kind of message that's going to make them consider it, and I'm going to make this kind of message that makes them transact and make that purchase decision. And when you start to look at it as a giant puzzle rather than one individual piece of the puzzle, I think you unlock a whole world of possible solutions. And I think that's the excitement in my mind of having that much data at your fingertips. You can literally do ads till you're blue in the face, but if you don't know how they're working or why they're working, then you're kind of just shouting into the wind.
It seems like we're making peace with the fact that advertising is not just about being creative and interesting and entertaining, that advertising is about being effective. And I think that, it seems like an almost, we should have known this type of thing already, but it feels like the industry, especially the creative portion of the industry, is starting to wake up to the fact that maybe the direct marketers had it a little bit right there from the beginning, that effectiveness matters in everything that we're doing. And it doesn't necessarily make us less creative. It actually inspires us to be more creative with the box that we're given.
Yeah, very well said. Very well said. I think that if you want to take a page out of the direct marketing playbook, anything that is digital is measurable, and anything that's measurable makes it direct for the most part. And so the principles that I learned while I was working at like a Rap Collins, as an example, are now more applicable to every aspect of business that I work on. So it doesn't matter if I'm doing an awareness generation campaign or I'm trying to get somebody to make that final click on the e-commerce site. It all comes back to measurable data, and that information is like gold. I have so much fun sitting with our analyst and talking to him about the different things that we're learning as this business continues to grow and evolve. And it makes me so happy to see everyone else in the room kind of light up when an analyst comes in with an insight that we never would have thought of because of what the data tells us. And I think if you're a creative person and you're not on board with this new world, you're going to find yourself out of a job pretty quickly, because it's not just about sitting there and making up the coolest piece of creative anymore. It's got to be effective, to Bob, to your point.
Darren, this is something that's right up in your sweet spot from the other angle, the data side. I mean, how much better is it to work in a room where the creatives are lighting up over the data and actually getting some kind of insight that powers the campaign, as opposed to being in an adversarial relationship, which is where it's traditionally been over the last decade?
Right. Yeah, Bob, this was very interesting too. As our agency at Streamline, we use data to inform a lot of our creative or digital campaigns that we do, but specifically for our audience generation or lead generation campaigns, right? So our chief creative officer was a math major, he was a biomath major, which is very interesting for him to be a designer and photographer, right? And so it creates a foundation for us to be interested in data and understanding analytics and how they play into into creating some type of action, right? Either clicking on a website, becoming a lead. And so, I think it's at the foundation of what the industry should have been doing. I think technology has advanced in a way that has allowed us to get to a point to look at efficacy and be more efficient about how we actually execute projects. But it's fun, and it's interesting to look at, like Colin said, just data that you may have never even thought of. You have this big idea, and the idea is completely shifted by empirical data that you see. And it's actually interesting when we build websites to look at how people are clicking just from a user experience side, and to inform that with how we redevelop a site. And so we actually just did that last week. And so it's necessary. It's not going to go away. And to Colin's point, for those creatives who are not embracing that, they're going to end up, withering away or being in a capacity where they're only executing a certain level of brief, and they don't have an adversarial role in things, or as much of a impact as they could.
Jonathan, this is something that's going to continue to be with us for the next 50 years, 100 years, whatever. If the future of advertising is based on this integration of database points with what's actually happening in the consumer mind. So what do you think is the big area that we still need to move forward in? What is the thing that's still holding us back from a total embrace and a total effectiveness in this marriage between data and creative?
What's holding us back? Dumb people. I think. Okay. No, but seriously. So you got to remember, Bob, you are a direct response guy.
Well, from way back in the
way
day,
back, but
yeah.
I mean that's your foundation.
Yeah, that's my foundation, right?
Yeah, and and I was one of the first chief digital officers, right?
Right.
So I came from that mindset. So it was a marriage between technology and direct response. That's where I came from. And I can't tell you how many times I would hear a collective hiss when I would walk into the room, because I was like, well, where are we going with this? Okay, but what is the data telling us? Well, nobody wanted to hear it. Now, hopefully, it's getting embraced a little bit more. But I'll tell you this: what's got to happen is data inundation is no data at all. And I think palatable increments of information is going to be where it's at. And I think what it's got to be is actionable, and it's got to be. We've got to have a position where it's guiding you to something, because I've been in these meetings now where the data is overtaking it, but it's not actionable. It's not, okay, so we've got all these data points, but where is this leading us, and how do we know that it's accurate? Right? So if you go way back to how you're collecting the data, if you go way back to how you're finding a consumer forensic or a consumer insight based upon the data, that's the bridge that I'm not seeing as much of as I'd like. People can tell me all these data points, these statistics and things of that nature, but how do we find a consumer forensic that says, look, this is the golden spot, this is the golden time, this is the golden message, this is the golden color, whatever it is, so that that algorithm can be conveyed to the consumer to get them to transact.
And does that algorithm need to work in real time all the time, or is that something that's just informing the creatives in their development process?
Well, I think it's real time and overtime. Because if you're not building on that cumulative knowledge, then you're just doing shotgun blast and one-offs. I think building cumulative knowledge, I think way back when we built the first e-commerce for my M&Ms, when I think back to that, the data that I don't work with M&Ms any longer, but I did again years later. So after we did my M&Ms, I worked with them again when I was at DDB in Chicago, and we started but they kept building on the data, and they were able to increase the price, increase the positioning, move to television advertisements, because they kept building on it. I don't see that in a lot of the companies that I've worked with historically, because turnover and other problems, but they're not always using what we learned from the past data insight.
Well, the last topic of the evening, an interesting look at email programs by Cheetah Mail. And by interesting, I mean this is very one-sided in its approach of surveying, because it's only talking about Cheetah Mail from what I can tell. But the survey and the study revealed that after GDPR, all measures of campaign success and email programs increased on average. Darren, I'm going to start with you. What the heck is going on here? I mean, it's just like, I thought GDPR was supposed to be a killer for all things digital, and it seems to be actually helping a lot of these programs to be more successful.
Yeah, I think that you start to look at things you segment audiences. You actually have people who are interested in getting the content right. So taking that extra step has helped in this case, the cheetah mail side, right? It has helped their clients because people are able to choose if they actually want this information, if they don't want this information. That segmentation and regulation actually has helped those clients because people are interested in the content that they're getting now versus it being the other way where sometimes their data wasn't protected or they were just added into the newsletter, and so you had higher rates of attrition and lower rates of lower rates of people opening or clicking because people either weren't interested or weren't getting the ads. I think now you have or could be creating a more targeted list with things like cheetah or cheetah mail's perspective. But I think on the MailChimp side or any other mail server, we may be seeing that happen just because people are more interested in content and there are layers that allow people to choose now.
Jonathan, yeah, go ahead, Colin. You had something to say?
Yeah, the only thing I could build on after that, because I think that was a pretty perfect summation of what I think is happening. The other level of this is the amount of personalization that you can get into. It might not have to do with GDPR per se, but if I know I'm marketing to an ethnic audience, I'm going to use photography that reflects the people who they are, as opposed to just the stock image of the Caucasian individual. If it's an older male, I'm going to use pictures of an older male. If it's a young female, I'm going to use pictures of a young female. If I know that they're, as an example, I used to work with I still work with a pet food company, and they have a really robust email platform that allows us to identify the kind of pet that they have. If we know that, then we're going to start using the images that are resembling their pet in our advertising. It makes it wildly more effective.
Well, and I think that's a great point. The only thing that I would maybe debate on that is that if you're targeting older men, maybe you show a younger woman.
It sometimes does work in reverse. You're right.
But the point you're bringing up is dead on in that it's personalization with contextualization. And I hope that doesn't sound too cliche, but again, you have to contextualize when, where, and how the people are viewing the message that you're sending too, right? Because let's face it, I don't have the greatest attention span, as I'm sure we've all learned on this one, but most people don't. So graphic language, graphic imagery, and things like that, and personalization of those images. If you can get those two things to work together, both hemispheres, well, then you got something.
And with that, it's time for the Ad Fail 5. But before we get to that segment of the show, I do want to take this quick opportunity to thank my guests again and allow them to each do a shameless plug, starting with Colin Glom. You can find him at cwhemp.com. That's the home of Charlotte's Web, the CBD nutraceutical company he is the head of marketing at. Tell us what's going on in your world, Colin. What would you like to promote?
I guess the first thing I want to clear up is that I'm not the head of marketing. I just work there as a creative, but I love the inflation of the title, so thank you.
Absolutely.
I guess from a shameless plug standpoint, I would love to direct everybody to a pet project I've been working on for a number of years. I've mentioned it on the show before. It's called the Windows Project. It is a cross-cultural collaboration between Cuba and the United States through dance. It's been led by Pedro Ruiz, who is a Cuban born dancer who escaped Cuba and came to the United States many, many years ago and is now giving back to his home country. It's a wonderful program that allows us to bring choreographers and set designers and lighting specialists and costume makers and all kinds down to the Cuban people so that they can elevate the level of ballet in the country. So that would be my shameless plug. Thanks for the opportunity.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. And that does sound interesting. Now, next up, we have Darren Martin. You can find him at several email addresses, but I'm going to give Bold Culture a shout out this time, boldculture.co. Tell us what's going on in your world, Darren. What would you like to promote?
Yep. Thanks, Bob. That's actually perfect. To Jonathan and Colin's point about creating messages that actually connect to cultures authentically. We just released our latest insight report, La Mosaica Latinx, which translates to the Latinx mosaic. It's covering Latinx individuals, affluent and influence in media marketing, tech, and advertising, both from a consumer level and also from a talent representation level. It's giving some skills to connect to Latinx professionals as well. And all of these perspectives are from Latinx professionals within the industry themselves. And so you can check that out at latinx.boldculture.co. And thanks, Bob, for having me again.
Oh, you're welcome. And anybody out there who has not checked out Darren's website or the content that his companies are generating, it's pretty great. He's put out some awesome reports on the multicultural space. And last but not least, we have Jonathan Sackett. You can find him at allscope.com. You can also find him at mashburnenterprises.com. Tell us what's going on in your world, Jonathan. What would you like to promote?
Well, first and foremost, I always want to promote this show because I love you, Bob, and we've been friends for years. I
love you too.
and listen, I share this show. I think I'd like to promote the show. I'd like to promote my co-panelists. These guys are top tier, top-notch guys, and doing business with their organization is only going to help yours. I'd also like to say happy birthday to my partner Jamal Mashburn. His birthday was just a couple days ago, and I know he listens to the show, even though he's flying to Hawaii right now, while I'm sitting here freezing my butt off in Chicago. Allscope, along with Jamal Mashburn, we are launching a multicultural, so keep an eye on that. You're going to see that discipline coming out as well. And the final thing I would say, aside from following me on Twitter at Jonathan Sackett, is that if you guys are familiar with Legends magazine, which is a basketball magazine, Jamal is on the cover of it, and that's coming out in 2 weeks. Bob, I will have an autographed copy for you.
Fantastic.
And Legends magazine is doing a whole feature on Jamal about his business acumen and the 400 lines of business that he owns. So we got a lot going on.
That does sound like an awful lot going on. So really, really awesome. Check it all out. As for me, for more information about me or the show, visit thebeancast.com. There you can find a complete show archive. You can find out how to consult with me. You can even find out how to advertise on the program. So check it all out at thebeancast.com. And now it's time for the Ad Fail 5, a rundown of the lowest moments in advertising, marketing, and public relations from the last week. And first up, Facebook is a very, very important ad platform, Darren. Remember how important it is? You mentioned how important it is. Yeah. Unfortunately, it's only as good as when it works, because in the days leading up to Black Friday, the platform kept crashing. All through Black Friday, it kept giving problems right into Cyber Monday. What was going on here?
Yeah, Facebook has some problems and they need to fix them. The past year has been crazy for them, I think, both politically and also operationally. And so they need to get it together, or people are going to find different avenues.
I actually think that they're probably scaling back the attention to it because it's been such a. I mean, I know it's their only revenue generator for the most part, but the politics around it and how divisive it's started to become. I think they're almost. It seems like from a level of resource standpoint, they're almost deprioritizing it as part of their overall platform. It's weird that it's not getting better; it's getting worse.
Well, yeah, the foundation that they built it on has never been improved. So what you're doing is you're building something with sticks and snot at this point, and just building on a faulty platform. So they're not going to shut it down for a month and try to rebuild the damn thing either, you know.
Speaking of faulty platforms, the former Facebook employee Mark Lucky slammed the company's treatment of black users and employees, stating in an outgoing memo that there are more Black Lives Matter posters than actual black people at the company. I mean, I'm thinking, as far as I'm concerned, Jonathan, this is the best burn I've ever heard. Such a great,
it's definitely up there. And I was going to say, joining the ranks of the future unemployed Mark Lucky. I don't know. I thought it was a huge burn, but I don't know how well that's going to go over. Whoa.
Yeah, I mean,
it really pokes holes into what Facebook has to fix on multiple levels. And his manifesto, as I call it, was very long and it was very true. And it speaks to what people in the tech industry, what in the ad industry, and the marketing industry are facing each day. And I think that Facebook has done a great job from this is an image perspective versus an actual change perspective. But that's indicative of many different tech companies and agencies who are slow to change but quick to speak. And so we have a problem with that. And I think that he did a great job by exposing it. And I'm hoping more do it at other companies so we can move forward.
What do you think the solution is, though? Because in the tech industry, if you walked into any company in Silicon Valley, I think you could find the exact same problem. So I think
For
that
sure.
it's a larger systemic issue. It's not just Facebook, right? It's
Oh
like
yeah,
it's
it's a systemic issue that roots outside of the tech industry into America. But I think that what we have to deal with is from a multi-angled approach, making sure people talk about the pipeline and increasing talent, but that's great. But how do we keep and retain individuals once they get there and also promote them across the ladder? We work with that at Bold Culture, no shameless plug there, to work with agencies and tech companies to do that. But the idea and the reality is many tech companies have to actually want to do that multi-tiered approach, and it's outside of the bottom line for this moment, right? They think they're just thinking about product, but the reality is you're losing billions of dollars in productivity, attrition, as well as continuing to have to hire people because you're not focusing on this larger systemic level.
Well, speaking of another problem that doesn't seem to ever get fixed, it only took years to accomplish, but the first 8 people, Colin, have been indicted for the crime of ad fraud. Ever. The first 8 people ever have been indicted. Only a few thousand more to go, right?
Did you read, though? It was 8 Russian nationals and 2 Kazakhstanis. And I was like, all right, there's got to be more people than this creating this kind of trauma in the industry.
Yeah, at least a few Americans, you think.
Yeah, you think.
I could name a few myself.
Yeah, it was really interesting. I think it's great that finally something's starting to happen in that regard, because there's so many bad actors in the space that it's kind of leaving the entire industry with a black eye. The same thing's happening in influencer marketing, where people are, artificially pumping up accounts, and then, you find out that there's really no substance to the media buy that you just made, because the quote unquote influencer isn't really an influencer at all. There's no engagement. There's no real traffic coming to their feeds.
Oh, we're getting to that story, Colin.
Sorry, I wasn't even thinking about that. Yeah, I wasn't even thinking about that. But it's great. We need to start policing ourselves, and we need to start doing it with some real teeth in order for people to take us seriously, especially large multinational companies who are spending millions and millions of dollars trying to do the right thing and reaching people, whether it be through social platforms or through influencer campaigns or through, in this example, digital media buys.
In-house agency services are all the rage these days. We've been talking about them on this show over and over and over again, but it isn't always the best idea. Just ask Intel, Darren, who effectively gutted their agency inside division, laying off all creative and production personnel. Happy holidays, you're fired.
Yeah, I think that what we find with in-house services is that they don't necessarily work. I think this is the 3rd time we've talked about in-house services not working in different capacities. It does suck for the employees and, to lose their jobs on the holiday season. But for a business, I think in agencies, there's a reason why brands work with agencies, and that's to have hopefully some type of objective expertise helping to become partners and obtain business goals, right? Or attain business goals. But, I'm not surprised. And I think other in-house agencies are also going to start to fold as well.
And you guys, I think I got it. Intel, not inside.
Right.
How clever.
Thanks.
My favorite ad fill of the week is next, and Colin kind of was hinting at this one. Payless, the shoe store, created an influencer event for a fictional brand called Paylessy that featured rebranded Payless shoes and sold them to their influencer attendees for $600 or more, proving once again, Colin, exactly how knowledgeable influencers are about the merchandise they hawk.
Oh man, I love this. I loved it for so many reasons, and it was brilliantly done. Whoever came up with the idea and how they executed it, bravo to Payless.
Yeah,
it was an agency. They worked with an agency. It wasn't in-house.
Bada bing.
Yeah.
Well, have something to add to this list or just want to discuss it? Comment online. Use the hashtag AdFail5. That's #AdFail and the number 5. And that does it for this week's show. If you'd like to subscribe to this podcast, visit our website at thebeancast.com and click on the subscribe link. If you're an iTunes listener, we've also provided a direct link to the iTunes Music Store, or just search for the BeanCast in the podcast directory of iTunes. And whichever podcast directory you use, when you subscribe, please leave us a review. Got a comment? Have a question? We'd love to hear from you. Just send your emails to beancast@gmail.com. Opening theme was performed by Joe Seibel. Closing theme by C-Jax. Thanks for listening. I'm Bob Norp. We'll be back again next week. Hope you'll join us then.
You know what I mean? It's like if it's, you know what I mean? I don't know, man. It's just like, okay, it's like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like totally like that. It's like, I don't know, like if it's, you know, it's like, you know what I mean? Yeah, it's just like kind of, it just seems like it's just like almost exactly. It's like exactly. Yeah. You know what I mean? Exactly.
Cool beans.